Thank you for coming today. This is the Professional Declaration of Eligibility workshop. We have one other person signing in, so I'm going to wait for him to get in the room before I do the introductions and the logistics of the room. Okay. I'm Victoria Wright. I'm the Marketing Outreach Coordinator for Department of Procurement Services. Like I said, this is the PDE information session. It is actually geared towards accountants and lawyers because a PDE has to be done by either an accountant or a lawyer. We do have to let you know that all applications now have to be done online. So Desiree will talk about that a little bit more in detail. Just so you know, all DPS workshops are now being live streamed to YouTube. The camera is facing only towards the speaker, not the audience. And for that reason, we're going to ask that you please hold your questions until the end so that Desiree can repeat your question and answer your question for people who are watching from home. We try to start on time and end on time. This workshop may not take an hour, but it just depends on how many questions you all have at the end. But Desiree and I will be here at the end if we go over 3:30 so that you can get all your questions in. So when you came in, you should have signed the sign-in sheet, taken an evaluation, which I will collect at the end. And then out there is the Schedule A help text, the document checklist, and an actual hard copy Schedule A. The Schedule A is only for your review. That hard copy Schedule A cannot be turned in when someone decides to be certified. That is only for you as a reference. We do pass out the document checklist and the help text to anybody who wants one. That's a good resource. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Desiree, and she is the actual certification officer, and she is going to host this workshop. So I will collect all evaluations at the end. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Victoria. As Victoria mentioned, I'm Desiree Atkins. I'm the Senior Certification Compliance Officer here with the City of Chicago for Department of Procurement Services. I'm one of the officers that reviews the applications as they come through. We want to welcome you to the Department of Procurement Services, and again, this is the Professional Declaration Eligibility Workshop. So what is a Professional Declaration of Eligibility? The Professional Declaration of Eligibility is an innovative way of allowing qualified attorneys and CPAs to review, verify, and attest that an applicant meets the requirements to become certified with the City of Chicago for a minority-owned business enterprise, which is the MBE, or a women's-owned business enterprise, which is the WBE. These are considered to be our local programs. What should be done? So what that means is that as CPAs and or attorneys or accountants and attorneys, what should be done during review? So a full review of all documentation should be done by the CPA or attorney. A site visit should be performed, and attestation by licensed professional, CPA or licensed attorney should be attached. Who's eligible? Eligibility includes for the MBE, WBE, those will be members of those two categories. Non-construction, non-supplier / distributor. No denial within past 3 years. No withdrawal within past 3 years. No graduation within past 3 years. So these are some of the areas in which, as you review applications, that you may want to ask or make sure that you're looking for when you're evaluating. Part of the Schedule A will ask a question related to these questions, and that way you can be able to ascertain whether or not someone is eligible in these areas if you have not created your own checklist as to how to do that.
So, sorry, that checklist is who's eligible for professional declaration, right, for the PDE? In other words, construction and PDE.
Correct. So the question is this checklist for who is eligible in order to perform a PDE? So the answer to that would be yes. This gives you information as to who can go ahead and do a PDE that is with the City of Chicago during the application process, who's reviewing.
Could we get a copy of that PowerPoint? Is that possible? Can you share that?
So the question is whether or not the PowerPoints can be provided. The PowerPoints cannot be provided, but but this presentation is available through YouTube, so you can view it later. What is the time frame? So once the file is received, and a cursory review will take place within 10 business days by a certification officer, and a decision will be issued. So in this case, the idea is that the person, the CPA or the attorney that is reviewing the application is aware of the regulations, the guidelines regarding the program, and in that they have performed a cursory review of this they have performed actually an in-depth review of this information. So then what will happen is that a cursory review will then take place by an officer within our Department of Procurement Services. And that way, that allows us to then turn around and provide a recommendation within a 10 business day time frame. What happens next? So the application, supporting documentation, and attestation. Once a decision is issued following the initial review, the file is subject to a full scope audit. The firm must submit annual no change affidavit and all other program regulations with respect to continuing eligibility. So what this means, and I just want to make this clear. So it says, okay, what happens next? So after the application is submitted, all the supporting documentation has been submitted, and the attestation that we spoke about earlier, that's submitted. Then there's going to be a decision that is issued following the initial review. The file is going to be subject to a full scope audit. The firm must, and then finally, the firm must submit an annual no change affidavit and other program regulations with respect to continuing eligibility. So once you get into the point of your firm has been recommended, because we're going to say if there's annual no change affidavit has been completed, that's the following year after you've been certified. Your certification, the certification is for 5 years. So annual no change affidavits have to then be submitted every year. This is important, that we want you to know this information because it helps you to relay this information to your clients as well. Thank you, Victoria. So, the files that are submitted, the applications that are submitted for our review, they are subject to a full scope audit if deemed necessary, and also on the following years to come for our audit. You can only submit the preliminary eligibility affidavit on the first time you are certifying. So licensed professional requirements. So we go back to who can perform the PDEs, what's required for that. So it has to be an attorney or a CPA. They must be licensed in Illinois and for at least 3 years. Has not been convicted or found liable of fraud and or making false statements, and no ownership interest or familial relationship with the application that is being submitted. The city does not endorse any licensed professionals. The city does not certify or endorse CPAs or attorneys to prepare applications for those vendors seeking certification with the city of Chicago.
In other words, the city doesn't certify CPAs or attorneys. There's no barrier to entry, right? So anyone who's licensed a little more than 3 years, meets those other qualifications, can submit something on behalf of any of those entities that meet those qualifications.
Okay, so that's a long question.
So in other words, so I could submit an application for his consulting firm. I don't have to go through any process to be certified by DPS, right?
So, well, what it's saying, and we'll tackle that question towards the end. So what this is basically saying is that the city in no way, the Department of Procurement Services or the City of Chicago can in no way steer or recommend or suggest who a firm should use in order to submit their PDE. That's what that means.
And there's no qualification other than being a licensed attorney for 3 years or CPA or whatever.
So what the requirement, well, so the question is that are there any other requirements? Well, it'll be important for you to be abreast of the regulations, the rules and the regulations. So even though it's not listed, that's something that we consider to be important, because if you're not able to, you can't effectively review an application or know what to look for or why you're requesting certain documentations or why certain documentations is being requested if you're not have a understanding of what the process is, what the rules, the guidelines that govern the program are. So although it's not considered to be a requirement, it is important piece that I would suggest that you do take under and review those, which is on the website.
So I have one question. Are you the ones who decide which attorneys or which CPAs?
The City of Chicago and the Department of Procurement, we do not make decisions based upon which CPAs or attorneys a vendor uses. That is completely up to the vendor to source and make decision as to who they're going to use.
Okay, so you don't have your own list?
No, we do not have our own list. So continuing on documentation, contact information. That's important to have. The type of certification you are seeking. So this information needs to be provided. The ownership information, employee information, facility information, financial information, licenses for applicants and businesses. So these are documentation that is needed by the vendor that is seeking certification.
So the license itself isn't enough information for them to have in order to move forward?
So when you say is a license enough in order for someone to move forward, are you speaking from the point of you being the one submitting the application, or you being the CPA or the attorney submitting the application, or you being the vendor trying to get certification?
The individual getting certification.
So no, those that are vendors that are looking to be certified as a MBE or WBE, those vendors need to supply several pieces of documentation in order for it to be reviewed to indicate whether or not they are in line with certain rules of the program.
So if I'm just licensed, okay, as a sole proprietor, and I have all of the credentials and all the information that the city requests, including the DUNS number, the tax ID, and all of that, I still would have to go through an MBE or a WBE in order for them to utilize me for the certification with the attorney and the CPAs.
Okay, so that's a question that we will probably.
It's a third-party situation.
So that's a question that we'll probably want to reserve for the end of the workshop. However, no one needs to use a professional declaration of eligibility to seek out certification. that is an option to use an attorney or a CPA. Vendors can submit applications for certification on their own accord. So additional documentation that would be needed would be to show experience in the form of resumes, professional associations, listing of equipment, leases. Contract information is needed, whether you have pending contracts or contracts over the past 2 years, year or 2 years, invoices and purchase orders. Documentation such as individual statements of ownership, personal net worth, IRS 4506Ts, which is a request for tax transcripts on their returns. These are additional documentation that will be part of the process for initial review for certification. What is meant by full scope audit? So full review of certification and firm. 100% of files submitted, subject to decertification. So the full scope audit is basically where the full review of the firm as it relates to certification is being reviewed. All of the files that's been asked for must be submitted, or we say this says files. You may also think of it as documents. All the documents need to be submitted because you can't do a full scope review without having all of the documents or forms. And all firms are subject to decertification. Penalties. So there are different types of penalties. So there's what's called technical errors, which are non-intentional penalties. Errors that didn't affect the certification outcome. So when you think about being a CPA or an attorney, this is what you kind of want to think about. So the different types of errors that there can be. So there may be an error, but it didn't necessarily change what the result of a certification outcome would have been, an approval or a denial. So on the first penalty, it would be a strike 1, which is a notice. A second strike would be additional training. A third strike would be the loss of eligibility, which would mean that unable to be utilized for review of vendors' files, which is similarly could be thought of in the same. We understand that sometimes you may get information that you weren't necessarily aware of. You may not have been privy to that information. This is understood by the department, and so on vendor and on the attorneys or the CPAs is looked at from a wider scope, not just a small scope. The other type of penalties you want to be conscious of would be technical errors. Technical errors are what's considered to be intentional. If it's determined that there is an intentional error to obtain certification, you will lose your eligibility. So if it's found, and which means that that would be some type of insight, maybe some sort of research that's done to find out, okay, was this error intentional? If that's determined, that then could be more significant penalty than just having, a notice or additional training that we provided when there's non-intentional errors. Substantial errors, not intentional. Errors that did not affect the certification outcome. First strike will require adopting compliance integrity agreement, or CIA. Second strike, professional will be barred from the program. A proposed decertification will be sent with right to appeal. Substantive errors. These are intentional. If it is determined that there is an intentional error to obtain certification, you will lose eligibility. Additional penalties. Professional of record. Refer to Inspector General's office. Refer to State Licensing Board for discipline. Refer to Corporation Counsel for prosecution under the city's false statements ordinance. Where you can go for help. So here we have Department of Procurement Services is always available, where we list our address as 121 North LaSalle, Suite 806. You can always contact us at 312-744-1929. Also, your area assist agencies. We have currently making use of Facebook, Twitter, and other means of social media in order to get information out to you. So we like for everyone to be aware of our Facebook address, which is the www.facebook.com/Chicago DPS. Or you can reach us by Twitter at www.twitter.com/Chicago DP. Also, our workshops are available via YouTube. We ask that you visit these sites. You can leave questions for us. You can submit information to us. We'll post bid advertisements and agenda and upcoming workshops and events. We also have new policies and procedures that affect vendors and communities that we list on these different media outlets. So we ask that if you have information that you would like for us to be able to distribute, if you have questions, if you want to make comments, we ask that you visit these sites and be able to see also what we have going on, not just through having to come down here to City Hall to the bid and bond or in the 8th floor, but you can also do it from comforts of home, office, or wherever you may have live streaming. We want to thank you for visiting Department of Procurement Services Bid and Bond Room. And this concludes the workshop portion. Now we're going to get into some question and answers. So I know a few of you guys had some questions that I asked. Let's reserve them towards the end. Sometimes it's because we go over it during the workshop portion. Sometimes it's because it may be a little bit more detailed than what we can say at the very moment. So having it for the end just makes it to where everyone can get more of their questions out if they have them. So at this point, I want to know who has questions. Go ahead.
It's 10 days for a cursory review. How long for a full and final decision?
So that the 10 days is the cursory review of that is given that, okay, let me back up. Let me say, the question is, if a cursory review is 10 days, how long is the actual review of the application? So the actual review of the application is being done by you. So you are looking at what a vendor has submitted to you and reviewing to see, okay, do I have everything that's being asked? Do the documents that I need, are they all together? Have I been able to gather all the information so that I can submit to the Department of Procurement Services for the review? Okay, and then that's the 10 days for us to turn around and then give a recommendation on that, because we are balancing our review based upon you've already done what we would have typically done.
I see, okay. All right. Okay, so then it's 10 days for the department to do a cursory review and make a recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Once the department makes a recommendation, how long for the recommendation for a final decision?
Well, so the question is that after the cursory review is done by the department, then how long does it take to get that decision in? Well, pretty much your decision is going to be given back to you within that same time frame, which is, so at the end of your 10 days, your 10 business days, you should know whether or not there is going to be an approval or preliminary denial for that file.
So essentially 10 days.
Essentially 10 days, yes. Now, so I'm going to go in with that to just make some clarity. So when there is going to be an additional review, so the firm gets approved. The firm is approved, and that certification is good for 5 years. When they go through recertification, then that is not going to be a professional declaration opportunity at that moment. That moment is then going to be a Department of Procurement Services review of that application at that point.
How long is that?
How long is the
The review at the 5-year point.
Oh, how long is a review at the 5-year point? So doing a recertification at the 5-year point, and they're still going to be dependent. So we like to say, and we try to stick to it, that our review is about, on average, 90 days given the information that's being received and in its completeness. But as you do get familiar with having your clients that you're going to be submitting the application on, that is so heavily dependent upon receiving the information from the client or the vendor, right? So if there is time to where it takes to get certain documents, that could lengthen the time frame. Where one piece may be lengthened, something else may be shortened. So you still kind of can sometimes balance it out. Depending upon complexity of a firm, it could extend out how long you actually end up to a point of being able to say, okay, yes, this is recommended for, one way or the other.
So it's potentially 10 days. It could be as fast as 10 days to get a decision.
For the PDE, yes.
So if I go to a client and I say, I'm going to review all your documentation, and you could potentially get an answer within 10 days, the client's going to say, that's great. What if I didn't use you? So what if a client comes in, that same client, without an attorney or CPA? What's the turnaround time? Is it 90 days?
So the question is that if a client is not using an attorney or a CPA, they decide they don't want to do that, what would be the turnaround time from application submittal to recommendation? And the answer to that is it goes back to, on average, 90 days.
Okay, good. That's good to know.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
So if I'm an attorney and my practice is right across the street, although I'm moving at 5 o'clock today, but until today, I'm across the street. So if I submit my certification to get my MBE, is it still the 10-day turnaround as a law firm, or should I have an attorney friend submit it so that I get the benefit of the 10-day turnaround?
So the question is that if I'm an attorney, can I submit my own application as a professional declaration of eligibility with a 10-day turnaround time? And my answer to that would be I have not had someone to do that yet. So that has not been a discussion that we have actually had. I'm inclined to say it probably would be in your best interest to seek out a different attorney, but I'm inclined to say that, but there's no definite. So on a question like that, I would say then if that's what you want to do, then you would contact us so then we can be able to give that information more concrete for you.
Okay. And you mentioned the full scope audit. How often does the department perform a full scope audit? And is that for every applicant, every other one, or just based on the content submitted?
So in general, every application that comes through is a full scope audit. So whether the full scope was done by you as a CPA or attorney, or whether or not it is one that is not done as a PDE. So the question is, does every application have a full scope audit? So the response to that would basically be yes. At some point, every application has a full scope audit.
I guess I'm trying to see, you have a list fill out the information for any of the proposals, the RFPs, and you want to utilize one of them on your application, right? And if you don't utilize them, then you have the option. Because when you're doing sole proprietor, you have all the licenses, all of the numbers that you need, the AR, the tax ID, you know, your social, and things of that nature. So I'm trying to find out this additional piece of information. Now, is this preventing information from going through on the proposals? Because this is something that we need in addition to, with the assistance or the confirmation from the legal department, which is the lawyers that we choose, or the certified public accountants that we choose. And that's an additional cost, am I correct?
Okay, so I'm trying to gain a feel for the question that's in the statement. So, for one, let me ask you your last.
All of this, and we applied for one of the proposals, right? And we have everything that they require based on the application when we submit it. You know, and then you have to write in your information what you want to do or what you can do based on the questions that they require, you know, on your proposals. So what I'm trying to find out, when you don't want to utilize an MBE or a WBE, because it's a sole proprietor business, you know, it's one individual. You're the AR, you're the sole proprietor, you're the president, you're the individual that's doing all the information, the applications and all of that. You're the one that's doing the notary, you know, like saying myself in a third party situation, but the first person. So I'm submitting everything that you require. So if we need to get this type of information too, because I've been in that office before, we need to get an accountant and an attorney to go through all the information that we've done here before for the application, and get them to do something in addition to with the procurement office, so you could decide if you're going to recommend us or not, when we already have done all of this work already.
Okay, so I need to try to figure out how to rephrase your question. So help me out here. So I believe that in part what you're asking is that, is it necessary to utilize a professional declaration of eligibility, meaning a CPA or an attorney, in order to apply for certification? Does that make a difference to procuring contracts or doing bids?
That's what I'm saying, is this is something that we have to have in order for the contract to go through or not?
So this has nothing to do with contracts, period. This has to do with certification, being certified as a minority-owned business enterprise or women-owned business enterprise. This is only a way in order to submit your application. No one has to submit their MBE or WBE application through a CPA or an attorney. They can do it on their own. But if you choose to use a CPA or an attorney because of the quicker turnaround time to get certified as a minority-owned business or women-owned business enterprise, then you would seek out your own attorneys or CPAs for that, and there would be at the cost of whatever that firm is charging for that service.
Okay, so this is based on what, if we want to change the way we're organized already.
This has nothing to do with your firm being organized. So your question is that, do I need to do this if we're changing how we're structured as a business? No. A professional declaration of eligibility is only for certification purposes, not for business structure.
So if we don't have the certification, that's why our proposals or grants and loans and all that doesn't go through? Or is it hindering, or is it going to be an asset to our information going through for financial security or for financing?
So is your question, why get certified?
Right, I'm saying if we have this, is this gonna make something else
If
positive happen?
If you have what?
If we have the PDE,
A PD
certification from them.
You don't get a PDE, you don't get a certification from the PDE. Your the Professional Declaration of Eligibility, you can submit an application for acceptance to the Department of Procurement Services a few different ways. You can go online and you can fill out what's called a Schedule A and submit your application directly to the Department of Procurement Services. Or you can choose to do what we're going through today, a Professional Declaration of Eligibility, where you go to an attorney or a CPA and they submit the same application on your behalf.
Okay.
Does that make more sense? Perfect.
And I don't think the department has this, answer my own question, I think, but if I put on my website or tell people that I can get you certified as long as you meet those things, and I can get you an answer in 2 weeks as opposed to 3 months, that's a great marketing tool for me. I'm sort of thinking out loud, you're not going to answer that. It makes sense because it's for these non-construction, certain things submitted by a CPA or attorney. You have a 2-week, 10 business days, 2 weeks turnaround as opposed to 3 months. That's better. That's good for marketing.
So, okay, so then the question would be,
It was more
the way in which you can market this to your clients.
Yes.
So, well, of course, you can market this in the best light that you feel that could benefit you. That's how it is. I would just recommend being careful in what you guarantee.
Right, yes, absolutely, yeah. I'm not gonna guarantee it. No, I used to work for the mayor, we met through Jane.
Okay. Well, somebody emailed me this morning asking me, how could they market this, or, do we recommend lawyers and accountants, which we do not. So if somebody asks us, we do not do a
Right.
recommendation. It's up to you to do your own marketing, and that's what I told the person in the email. You have to market yourself for this service.
And this is a win-win for everybody. I had a conversation with somebody about this. This is great for the department because it saves you from all that time. And you have people who you trust, not specific attorneys or CPAs, but CPAs or attorneys who you trust, and you say, we trust you're going to go through all this stuff. You do it, you submit it, it saves the department a lot of time going through paperwork, and that's why it's a faster turnaround. So the department benefits, and the individual companies benefit in terms of getting the certification, because it goes from 3 months to 2 weeks, and of course the attorneys or CPAs benefit, because they could potentially charge a fee, not guaranteeing anything, but just saying it's a faster process. This PDE process is much faster.
Right. Well, yeah, the PD is absolutely as much faster. I mean, the other thing is that you have more of an opportunity to decipher who you're taking in as who's going to be your clients that you're doing this for. So then you have time that you have proportionately allocated specifically to your client list. You know who they are. You choose who to take on, who not to take on. Perhaps that there is some firms that maybe you find that, okay, you really don't seem to fit the criteria. Maybe I need a little bit more information, or you just don't fit the criteria. You then are choosing who you're submitting, and that's based upon your findings from what was presented to you. So that does make it a lot easier for us, or it should. That's the goal. The goal is to make this better for our department to be able to review them fairly quickly based upon the recommendation that you put forward, because you've done all the work already.
Right, because if you, without the PDE process, I know that a lot of businesses, as they try to get certified, will just submit a pile of junk, right? Sometimes it's not that well organized, and that's a lot of work for you guys to go through it and sort it. So if you have a CPA or an accountant or an attorney do this, it sorts it out, it's organized, you know you're getting a better quality product up front. That's the example.
It's definitely easier to filter through the information, and we are typically not asking sending out RFIs on that. We're not doing the back and forth of asking for additional information. Getting around to trying to figure out what did they mean by it, getting clarity. Those areas because you've already gotten that information. So even when you're providing, maybe there's a summation of some sort, you're filling in areas that, okay, it creates a full circle for us to be able to say, okay, I get it. I know what this is. Great.
So the technical errors you mentioned, unintentional and intentional. Strike one is a notice, strike two is additional training, and strike three is you lose eligibility. Does that apply to the attorney CPA or the business that's seeking certification?
So it actually can apply to both. But for the purposes of this, it's applying to the CPA or the attorney.
And losing eligibility.
Basically, it's to protect vendors, because we don't want attorneys and accountants who are turning in bad.
Right, and it defeats
Right.
the purpose if you have this process that attorneys and CPAs are turning in garbage. That defeats the whole purpose of this whole.
And basically, what could happen is our CPO could decide that you're trying to do this, but you're not doing it right. So she might make you come to the workshops. She might make you come in and sit down with a certification officer. So it'd be like, okay, you need to stop doing this and get some training before you
Right.
do it again.
How long is the eligibility lost? Lost eligibility. Strike three.
It's not like, oh, you mean once you get to strike three?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully you don't get to strike three.
Yeah.
Well, the goal, right? The goal would be not to get to strike three. So.
What's the website where you can do the Schedule A on the system?
So that would be at the website for doing the Schedule A online is www.chicago.mwdbe.com.
And this is for the PDE.
No, that is for just submitting any application. That's for submitting your application. The Professional Declaration Eligibility application, we accept that to be turned in directly to our office. That may change in the future, but right now, giving the time frames for review and receiving, those come directly to our office room 806, yes.
And none of this applies to construction firms, correct?
Correct. Construction firms are not eligible for the PDE.
Is there a similar program for construction firms, or?
I mean, they could file it, they could do it the regular way. I mean, it's not to where an attorney or a lawyer can do it, because for us, we need to make sure in our department that one of our officers and our field analysts have gone and made sure that they fit the criteria for eligibility. So we want to, I guess for lack of a better phrase, is that the ones that are less complicated, we would want to then be able to feel that we could have that representation by a CPA or attorney. Construction can become complex to gauge and create, so that tends to be where you guys may find yourself sitting with us trying to figure out, okay, wait a minute, what do I do with this, what do I do with that? And that would then definitely extend not only a process with you and your client, but then also a turnaround for us and being able to review it within that 10 days. So we just choose to say, hey, you know what, we'll retain that for the office, and then the CPAs and attorneys can do the non-construction.
Now, the package of information for the DPE, do you have that? Are you giving that to us, or we have to go online and pick that up too?
I'm sorry, the packaging information for
The
what?
PDE that we have to send to your office directly.
So
For the Professional Declaration of Eligibility.
and when you say the packaging information, what type of information are you speaking
You know,
of?
the package of information that you request to
That's
fill out.
everything that you had on the table.
The-
You have to have
like the check-
document checklist.
The checklist, the help tax.
Give me this package right here.
So that's the information that you use in order to check to make sure that you're getting what you need from the clients. So it helps, like for instance, the help text helps you to understand what's on the application. The checklist helps you to identify what are those documents that you need for the vendor to turn over to you.
So following up on that question, if I submit something on behalf of a client, would I, in my cover letter, write my law firm representing ABC Company through the PDE program to sort of trigger this is a 10-day thing, or how does your office process that this is PDE in 10 days, not the 90 days?
So how our office processes a PDE is that yes, you would have to submit a stationary letter, company letter, stating that with the intention on this application, and there's an attestation.
I think there's a document.
Yeah, that's online that you have to put on there. And so that, if you go to the cityofchicago.org/procurement, there is where you can go through their steps, where you can go through, and it's for forms and documents. And there is a professional declaration of eligibility form that's there. But you would definitely have like your letterhead, because you have to have the client also signing off saying, yes, I give the okay. So it's that authorization. So it's a few different pieces that you can have together.
And all applications, you said, are all applications only online, or is it possible to do online and hard copy?
So the applications as of January 1st, 2016 are now online. But for certain programs, not everything has been converted. So for instance, for this program, if you're submitting a professional declaration of eligibility, right now, to my knowledge, that is not what's available online to be able to trigger the turnaround time that we need it to be just yet. So for that, we're accepting in hard copy. But it can, there's ways in which we can work with you if you wanted to submit that online.
Okay.
Now, if this is submitted to you, to your office directly, without the utilization of an attorney and a CPA, what do? You turn around and give us the package back and tell us that we have to go look for an attorney or for a CPA and then come back and resubmit it?
If you are submitting the package if you're submitting a package in hard copy, or?
Right, like you said, to your office.
No, if you're not a CPA or an accountant, you have to do it online.
Right.
You can't submit it paper.
You have to submit your application online.
We're not gonna ever tell you to go find an attorney or an accountant. That's up to you. But you cannot turn in a hard copy at all. Only an attorney or a CPA can turn in a hard copy. Oh.
Everyone else has to do online.
Yes. As of January 1st, everyone has to do online. So the way we look at that, for clarity, every vendor has to submit online. But if it is a CPA or attorney, or their office, an attorney's office, a CPA firm that's submitting on behalf, saying this is a PDE, then that one is in hard copy.
So this is the page on our website. I guess I should have showed you how to get it, but this is the page.
I'm not sure they can see that.
Notification forms and documents is the last line up there. This computer's a little slow.
So-
There is a form
Yeah.
on the site for PDE for you to fill out to say that that's why you're
Scroll down.
eligible to submit it.
So remember when I gave you the website, the cityofchicago.org/procurement? That was the first page that Victoria just took you to. And at the bottom of that page, that's where it had the options for forms and documents. And then when you click there, that's where it took you to this browser to show you the forms and the documents. And on here, you see this section, Professional Declaration of Eligibility. And then there's three options. So there's the attestation form. Then there is the eligibility facts and question, FAQs, and then it's the Professional Declaration of Eligibility Rules and Regulations, which takes you back to the information that was in the PowerPoint that we went through. Yes.
But,
And the rules and regs are also on this page.
Okay.
A link to get to them, I should say.
I'm sure that will be helpful.
so that's the form that you would
Oh,
fill out,
okay.
that you would submit with the application.
And so the DPE process, by definition, I guess, would have to be hard copy. We wouldn't do it online.
PDE.
PDE, sorry.
Yes.
PDE would be
That's what,
online.
Right.
This, right now, they're still taking PDEs as a hard copy.
Okay.
So if there are no more questions, if you have individual questions, we can answer off while we're still here, but I'm gonna ask if everybody can fill out the evaluation form, and I will collect that.
Oh my gosh. Look, I wasn't prepared for that.
You can go upstairs and watch yourself.
Look, no, I can't.
Go upstairs and
Well, no, I can't. I don't want
I knew you were